Drums, please. Summertime. Time to kick back and unwind. Here it is, groove slightly transformed. Just a little break from the norm. Just a little something to break the monotony of all this hardcore dance that has gotten to be a little bit out of control. It's cool to dance, but what about a groove that's smooth and makes romance? Just give me a soft, subtle mix. And if it ain't broke, then don't try to fix it. Don't try to fix it. Think of the summers of the past. Turn up the bass and let the Alpine blast. Pop in my CD and let me run a rhyme. And put your car on cruise and lay back, cause this is summertime. 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 Time to kick back and unwind. Time to kick back and unwind. Hey everybody, it's the Good Brothers Wrestling Podcast, back at you once again. I'm Good Brother Mike. With me as always is not Good Brother Bobby. We've gone our separate ways. That's right, he's gone on vacation and I'm still going to work, and that's how we record this podcast, going up and down the highways and byways of this great land, talking about wrestling. And now, because I'm just talking to myself, I try to act like this is natural. It's not natural. I don't talk to myself usually in long monologues on the way to and from work, but today I'm going to, just because we want to give you, the Good Brothers Wrestling Podcast listeners, a reason to live this weekend, you know? Just something to make you smile, make you think, and mainly just keep our names in your heads. Hey, speaking of our names, Good Brothers Wrestling on Facebook. Go over there, like that page. I'm posting over there a lot. It also lets you know when there's new content up on goodbrotherswrestling.com, goodbrotherswrestling.com. Or you can follow us on Twitter, at GoodBrothersWP. And as always, subscribe to this podcast on iTunes or Stitcher or Google Play or however you're listening. We're available in a lot of places now. YouTube, Spotify. Yeah, shout out to Spotify for finally adding us and what I can only assume is every Anchor podcast. I'm sure our numbers haven't impressed Spotify corporate. There wasn't a Spotify board meeting where they said, you know, these guys, they've been creeping up on us. I think we're getting our finger off the pulse if we don't add this Good Brothers Wrestling Podcast to our suite of podcasts here on Spotify. They say, you know what, you're right. Warren, I imagine a guy who works there is named Warren. Warren, call up the Good Brothers. Get me that RSS feed. We've got to have them. I want it on the front page of the New York Times. Good Brothers Wrestling Podcast comes to Spotify. Exclusive contract through 2021. That's probably not what happened. I don't read the New York Times, so if it did, I haven't been informed. They didn't link us in the web article. I don't know. Anyway, hey, I'm here to talk about wrestling today. It's been an interesting week and change for wrestling. Thanks everybody who listened to our last podcast. That was from last week. Where we talked about Hulk Hogan's return to WWE and the Ghost of Ultimate Warrior. That's still out there if you want to check it out. So the Hulk Hogan return, man, that's still getting a little bit of heat, mainly from guys who are less than thrilled that Hulk's been allowed to return to the company. Titus O'Neil, I know, has had some comments, and the New Day had some comments. All in their own way valid, I guess. You know, if somebody said something that was hurtful to me, I would not be so quick to forgive them, especially without an individual apology. If somebody gets up in front of everybody and says, you know, sorry, they're filming this for my new documentary because I'm back in the company and I'm sorry. You know, that doesn't really ring true. And that's not a truthful apology. It's not. I mean, whatever happened before, the 3 years before, things Hulk Hogan has said, and Hulk Hogan has, in my opinion, sounded remorseful. He's certainly remorseful that he lost his spot and all that crap came down on him, but he also won a bunch of money from his suit against Gawker, who brought that phone call out to begin with. So anyway, yeah, so, you know, my thoughts on Hulk. I don't think Hulk Hogan's a racist in the form of, you know, I hate a certain race. You know, I don't want to be around them. I think they're less than. You know, that's racism. I'm not going to work with people of certain races, of certain colors. We all know that's not true. Hulk Hogan's worked with anybody you can think of. He certainly won't work with a small guy or a guy he deems not as over as him, not back in his day. But Hulk Hogan certainly has worked with everybody. Seems like a nice dude from that perspective. But it seems like he's game, But I do think Hulk Hogan went through a bad period in his life, man. When Hogan put his family on TV with that Hogan Knows Best reality show, his family fell apart. You have to think his marriage to Linda Hogan, it lasted throughout his entire run in the business. All the crazy 80s and the NWO 90s, Linda was right there married to Hulk. And then the wrestling thing wraps up for Hulk, and he gets the deal with reality TV, and it was an interesting person to put on TV. He's got his 2 kids. But, man, his family went nuts. And it's hard to say if the Hogans, Brooke and Nick and Linda, would have went off the rails had they not been on TV. I postulate that they would not have. When you can keep a family together in the wrestling business, and we've seen that that's a very tricky and hard thing to do. You don't see a lot of guys with lasting marriages and healthy families when they've been in the business as long as Hulk Hogan was, especially in that time period. But you look at Ric Flair. He's 4 wives, 5 wives, definitely has issues with his kids, has had issues with his kids. So bravo to Hulk. Hulk made it that far, and then the reality TV thing took his family, threw him for a loop. All of them went crazy. Nick winded up in jail. Brooke Hogan turned into this weird pseudo celebrity doing weird things. Linda left Hulk Hogan for a younger man. Hulk Hogan went crazy, and I think that at the time, it didn't turn him racist. It just turned him hateful. He just had a lot of hate in his heart. His son was in jail. His wife's running around with a man, half his age. And he's on the phone, and this conversation that we heard with Nick, also not in a good place, was hateful. And when you have hate in your heart, when you just have hate in your heart and you're in a dark place, everything's fair game. Everything is fair game. I'm sure that it wasn't just racist things that Hulk said. That's what he got caught saying. I wouldn't be surprised if he said things against gays or things against speech against Asian people or anybody. When you hate, when you get into a position where everything in your life is bad, it's hard to see good in anything. And when you're not seeing good and you get filled up with hate, you lash out at everyone. I have been in places in my life where I've been hateful. Certainly I've had things go on. I can remember I'll tell this story. I guess it makes me a bad person. People could say this makes me a bad person, but years ago, I was trying to have a baby. I have one now. She's beautiful. Happy birthday, Carrie. She turned 1 earlier this month. And me and my wife at the time could not, for whatever reason. And, after months and years of that, you get really bitter, or I got really bitter. And I remember I would park in the expectant mother parking spaces at stores as a way of lashing out. And that is a terrible thing to do. It's a terrible thing to do. I probably would have parked in a handicap spot had, I have the threat of being towed because I had hate in my heart. I hated people with kids. I hated kids themselves, expected mothers. That's insane. Like, saying that now, I can't believe that was me, but it was. I was mad, and I'm not saying that justifies my actions. I'm saying that doesn't make me a kid hater now, or that means that at that time I was in a bad place, and that has to be understood. But you can get out of that place, and I think Hulk is in a better place if you go by his Twitter feed. Now, maybe it's all just a public face. Maybe he's still in a dark place and mad and angry. But I don't think so. I think Hulk kind of had his come to Jesus moment, not literally, but he kind of realized everything was crashing down, brother. It all came crashing down and it hurt inside. It all came crashing down around him, and he he kind of realized, oh man, I gotta turn this thing around. And his situation changed, his attitude changed, and he's not that person that he had become in that dark time. So I think all this to say, I think the Hulk Hogan that was captured on that audio tape was somebody that the people in the business never knew. From a business perspective, from a WWE perspective, nobody knew that Hulk Hogan that was full of just that anxiety and hatred. And I dare say that now that he's back, that's not him anymore either. So I think we have to give people chances to grow, to go through the phases of their life. I think we have to give them a chance if we... Well, I take that back. No, we don't. We don't have to. But I think you can. And I think a lot of people are willing. A lot of people realize that. And a lot of people are, like the New Day, we're just kind of wait and see. They're like, well, we'll wait and see. And I think that's smart. That's really smart. Because maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Hulk Hogan was this raging racist all along. And it was just inside of him. And then he just got caught venting it. And he just kept it under wraps really well when he thought nobody was listening. Maybe that's true. So I can understand the New Day's perspective. Titus O'Neil, a little bit, he comes out and says he didn't think Hulk Hogan's apology was remorseful. I understand that too, and I don't think that the apology that he heard was remorseful. But Hulk Hogan didn't do anything directly to Titus O'Neil, so I don't think there was any reason for Hulk to go up to Titus first thing and be like, I'm sorry, man, and explain himself or whatever. No, I think that should happen. I think if Hulk's going to work with these guys, if he's going to be at events with these guys, he should slowly make the rounds and talk to everybody, from Mark Henry and the New Day and, maybe Cedric Alexander get an apology. I don't know. Maybe Cedric will be standing with some other black wrestler and he'll get the apology. I don't think Hulk Hogan knows who Cedric Alexander is, which is unfortunate because Cedric Alexander tearing it up on 205 Live right now. Anyway, I digress. So that's my take. It was kind of longer than I thought, but that's my take on the Hulk return and kind of the buzz around it. And maybe we should all just take a wait and see. But overall, from a wrestling perspective, glad to see Hulk Hogan at least back till his name can be breathed again, till we can kind of understand his place in the history of the business. Huge place, bigger than anyone else other than maybe Stone Cold Steve Austin, maybe bigger than Stone Cold Steve Austin too, just from a length of his run. Bigger than John Cena, maybe. Yes, he's the foundation of sports entertainment that we know today. Let's move along because there's a lot of big stuff popping. I sang Summertime at the beginning, so I was singing. It took me 15 minutes to get into this, but so Bobby's not here. He's on a cruise. He's wrapping it up today. He sails back into port tomorrow, into Cape Canaveral, and then makes the unenviable drive back up to Virginia on Saturday, or Sunday, I mean. And then, so we don't have two phones, so I couldn't do my music today, so I'll just sing you a little bit of DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince's classic single, Summertime, from the album Home Base, if you're looking, from all the greatest hits albums from, just Spotify, search Summertime. Does anybody even care what album anything's on anymore? I care. Personally, I care. But I'm saying you kids today. So yeah, big stuff going on this summer. You can't talk about summer without talking about Summerslam. And Summerslam really shaping up, man. It's coming together. We know from Raw this week that Roman Reigns, fresh matchup here, folks. Roman Reigns taking on Brock Lesnar for the Universal title at SummerSlam. That match we've been dying to see again and again and again and again. Until Roman can beat him and Brock Lesnar goes back to UFC for good, we'll just keep seeing Roman versus Lesnar. I'm surprised at this. I really thought that there would be some sort of interference, some sort of schmoz, screw job, whatever you want to call it, that would cause that match between Lashley and Reigns on Raw to end in a no contest, and we get the triple threat at SummerSlam. That's kind of how they've kept Lesnar fresh-ish, is put him in these multi-man matches. So I'm really surprised we get this main event for the third time in, 4 months, Lesnar Reigns. But, let's go for it. I guess it doesn't even, even if Reigns beats Lesnar, it's hard to say, he finally bested him. it almost seems like a fluke at this point because Lesnar's been beaten so many times. Now, I guess they can go back. I mean, Reigns has been beaten so many times. I guess they could go back and say, at the Greatest Royal Rumble, he had that screwy finish with the cage exploding, and then the ref said, Lesnar touched the ground first, or Reigns touched the ground first. Obviously that was kind of a no contest situation. But still, I don't think we've ever seen a time when it didn't look like Lesnar was better than Reigns from an in-ring perspective. It never looked like Reigns had Lesnar's number. So I guess if you're a huge Roman Reigns fan, you're going to be happy to see this match. I could really pass on it. But also on the SmackDown side, we got this week, AJ Styles will defend the WWE title against Samoa Joe, who kicked things off with a mega bang on SmackDown, choked out AJ, told Stephanie that, or was it Stephanie? No, Paige. He told Paige, that he was phenomenal or whatever. I don't know. I really love Samoa Joe's intensity. And I noticed that he'd been off TV for a while. And I was just glad to see him back, the last couple weeks taking on R-Truth and Ty Dillinger. So it was good to see him back. I was like, well, maybe we'll get some wins under Joe's belt and kind of build him up. Because that's something that didn't happen with a lot. That's something that hasn't happened with a lot of the guys they call up from NXT. They bring them back. They bring them up to the main roster. And they kind of say, oh, here's this guy and he's a big deal. And they get a huge pop on WrestleMania weekend because everybody there on the WrestleMania shows went to the NXT shows. I'm convinced of that. You go to NXT, you go to WrestleMania, you go to Raw, and maybe you stick around for SmackDown, maybe. Now that that's the case. When I went to WrestleMania, we went to Hall of Fame, Raw, and WrestleMania. NXT wasn't around at the time, or didn't have a show at the time. We went to an ROH show the night before. But if NXT had been around, we certainly would have went. That's just what you do. It's the big event. It's like a festival. So it's all the same people that got to get a huge pop because everybody knows them. But then when they settle in, you're going to the regular towns, the regular TV audience, they may not be familiar with NXT. Now, some of them are, but some of them aren't. And I don't think they always play off the character that they were in NXT. They don't really play off their NXT accomplishments, but they expect you to know who they are and know, well, they are accomplished. So they don't get that run, a kind of introductory run of getting wins under the belt and showing us why they're a big deal. And I think that happened with Joe. I think that's happened with Bobby Roode, Nakamura. The list goes on and on and on and on. So Joe, kind of has faltered. He got a main event against Brock Lesnar. But even though I look back at that main event last year, and it feels like that it was always a foregone conclusion that Joe was not winning that match, and we were going to move on to whatever the main event was going to be the next pay-per-view. It was a one and done. Joe was just a placeholder. Let's see how Joe does against Lesnar. So, man, I sure talk a lot when Bobby's not around. So Joe is back on SmackDown, makes a huge statement, wrestling AJ for the title. It's a TNA Dream match on a WWE stage. I'm excited about that match. I think those styles mesh up well. Of course, Styles and Joe have been in the ring tons of times together, so they should have chemistry. Of course, so hopefully we don't get the debacle that was Nakamura AJ at WrestleMania. And not only was that match bad, man, they milked that match so much. That match is donezo. Like, there's nothing left to do between Nakamura and AJ except sigh about what less than stellar matches they had together. So Joe, AJ, I'm psyched, man. The Samoan submission machine, the monster of SmackDown, really, Samoa Joe, taking on maybe the greatest WWE champion we've seen in maybe the greatest new superstar we've seen this decade, AJ Styles. I don't think that's far-fetched. I don't think that's far-fetched to say if you go back to 2010 and look at the people who's debuted, the people who've won championships. I think AJ Styles is up there. Now, maybe I'm missing Daniel Bryan. I don't remember when Daniel Bryan debuted. But I think at this point, not from an over perspective, but from accomplishments and visibility and main events, I think AJ Styles has had a better run than Daniel Bryan has had, especially when Daniel Bryan was on top. We'll say from that SummerSlam where he won the title for a second before getting the Money in the Bank cash in from Orton, when he beat Cena for the title, all the way until his first big injury where he dropped the title. I think AJ certainly has had a better run on top than Daniel Bryan had. So that's my statement. AJ Styles, greatest new superstar of the decade. And the decade's ending, folks. We've only got like a year left on this thing, a year and change. So get your decade choices in now. So we've got that going. It looks like Miz versus Daniel Bryan. They're finally going to pull the trigger on that at SummerSlam. That feud that should have. I don't understand why we didn't do this at WrestleMania, but I understand waiting for SummerSlam, I guess. So Miz, Daniel Bryan going down. That's going to be a good one. That's going to be a really good one. You know, I watched the WWE 24 on the 25th anniversary of Raw last weekend, and I saw the Miz on there, and it was that on that show he beat Roman Reigns for the IC title. It was a feature match, and then he went over to the Manhattan Center and entertained the crowd a little off TV. And the Miz was very into how much respect that the crowd had given him. And I think it was the first time he'd felt that from the crowd. The first time he'd felt validated, like, I am a heel, I am a bad guy, but they respect me. They respect what I'm doing out here. And that's something that people had not done. The Miz, and the Miz had started to get a little bit of appreciation ever since he cut that promo on Daniel Bryan last year on Talking Smack. Everybody remembers that. But seeing that finally grow into something that he's, into not just momentum for his career, but getting that back from the fans to know that, that he's theirs now. They care about him now. That's a good feeling for the Miz. And so I think this Miz versus Daniel Bryan, who a lot of people think may be leaving. Daniel Bryan may be on his way out come September. If the Miz went over Daniel Bryan in that spot, I don't know that that's going to get any goodwill for him, but it will be good for his heel character. I think the real thing right now, all we can focus on is that match being good. I want Daniel Bryan versus the Miz to be a good match. And anything else after that, we'll see. I just don't see Daniel Bryan leaving and going to the Indies. I don't see that happening, but I realize it's still a possibility. And I heard recently that Nakamura and AJ and the Good Brothers, to a lesser extent, all their contracts are coming up due pretty soon. So it'll be interesting to see if they re-sign. I think AJ Styles will definitely re-sign. The Good Brothers, I think if they're making bank, stick around. But Nakamura, that's an interesting one. Will he want to stay in WWE or go back to Japan? I guess we'll see. I think WWE's using him well. I think he's growing as a character, so I'd like to see him stick around. Maybe figure that whole in-ring style out a little bit and become, the total package that I wanted to see since he debuted. So that's SummerSlam. I know the other stuff's going on. We've got Ronda Rousey versus Alexa Bliss for the championship. Ronda Rousey getting a lot of kudos, getting a lot of opportunities for somebody that's been suspended and then had their suspension extended. It just, man, I don't mind Ronda Rousey being on WWE TV. I don't mind her wrestling for the Women's Championship. I don't mind her being in a feature position. But it just aggravates me so much when you go back to the Royal Rumble this year, the Royal Rumble this year, Rousey makes her on-screen debut, and then they announce she signed a full-time WWE contract. That was the headline. That was the wording. A full-time WWE contract. Boy, do we get swerved. How often has she been out there? 10 this year? Has she worked 10 dates? She's been in the ring like 4 times. I know she was on an MSG show. Don't work me. Don't work me. Don't tell me she's full-time when she's not full-time. That's a bald-faced lie. I understand that they're using this, and, we're headed towards Charlotte and Ronda for the championship at WrestleMania, and I wouldn't be surprised if it was main event. Now, I don't know how we'll get there. It's interesting to see how we'll get there. Will Ronda get moved over to SmackDown? I think when we have the All-In show, the Evolution show, which I'll talk about in a second, that things will become more clear on that. But yeah, I think that's what we're headed for, and that's a huge attraction. I understand. It helps give a reason to put the women in the main event of WrestleMania, which they've been tripping over their weenies to do. Is it better to say weenies than dicks? I don't know. They've been tripping to do since they got, since the whole women's evolution began. So let's talk about that a little bit. So this Monday Night on Raw, it was announced beforehand Stephanie was going to come out and make this historic announcement. And when they say the word historic, it's got to be about the women. I mean, let's face it, you paid for the women. The historic announcement. So Stephanie comes out. There was a lot of rumor. Was it going to be a women's tag team championship, which I think would be great for the division, or was it going to be an all women pay-per-view? Because the rumor was they were going to do an all women's pay-per-view as sort of an apology for the Greatest Royal Rumble, which the women were not allowed to wrestle on. So no women at the Greatest Royal Rumble. So now we're going to get a women's only pay-per-view, and Stephanie comes out. Vince is there, Triple H is there. It was everybody was on the stage. You saw all the women standing up front, so you knew it was going to be a women announcement. And Steph makes the announcement, October 28th, WWE Evolution, the first ever women's only pay-per-view. I don't know why we needed a women's only pay-per-view, but I think it's a good thing. I think it's a good thing to get a bunch of storylines going for the ladies. And I think it'll be good. I think it will be a good pay-per-view. Certainly Ronda Rousey's name's going to carry it, but, Charlotte should be back from her injury pretty soon, so I'm sure she'll have a match on there. They said all the women's titles will be on the line. The Mae Young Classic, this year's Mae Young Classic, finals will be on that show. And hopefully we'll get that women's tag team title on that show. So I think it's going to be a good thing. The thing I noticed the most when they made this announcement, it wasn't Stephanie, and I think this was key. It was having Triple H out there, because Triple H looks at these women, 90% of them came up from NXT. And he looks at these women, and they're his creations in a way. They're his babies. He got that division going in NXT. Yes, Triple H, that's who did it. That's the man behind the women's evolution. And you could feel when he was making his comments, you could feel the pride that he has for these women, for this division. And I think he sees his legacy continuing in the business, because as a man who has all daughters, I don't know if him and Stephanie are looking to make any more kids, but right now they only have daughters. He can see his legacy continuing through his girls. I think he sees that as a real opportunity ring-wise. And never forget, Triple H is a wrestler's wrestler. He loves wrestling. He loves old wrestling. He loves storylines a lot, but he loves the in-ring stuff. And I think that he can see now that there is a clear path that, his generations to come can be in-ring performers on the level maybe that he was, which is the highest level. So the passion that Triple H had in those comments, I think that really said a lot, and it set up Evolution to be a good pay-per-view. Now, will it? Who knows? But I think I have a lot of hope for it. And it's in October, when there's not a lot of marquee WWE stuff going on. I mean, you can say Survivor Series at the end of November, but Survivor Series has been such a lame duck. It's the ugly duckling of the big four, for sure. I mean, what goes on in Survivor Series? What really happens in Survivor Series? Can you tell me we get those 5-on-5 Raw versus SmackDown matches, which are good, but is it worth being one of the big four shows? I don't think so. And now that every show is co-branded, Survivor Series is really going to have to work. And I say keep working the gimmick, but give us some big match, some marquee reason to keep Survivor Series around and keep it as one of the big four. So WWE Evolution coming. Summerslam getting set up. Man, what a week, And I guess they announced the Jericho Cruise main event is going to be Bullet Club versus Alpha Club, which is going to be Jericho and the Young Bucks taking on Cody, Marty Scurll, and Kenny Omega. So that's a huge main event. I hope there are cameras on this Jericho Cruise. Maybe not even as an event. I mean, that would be cool to put out like a full event DVD. But just to see clips and see what happens. Because I think it's going to be cool. I think there's going to be some All-In stuff going on there. I think we'll find out some more about All-In after that Jericho Cruise. Oh, no, I apologize. The cruise is after All-In. So that All-In Fallout. So, yeah, great. It's a great time to be a wrestling fan with the women's evolution. I mean, there's just new stuff happening. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention NXT this week. I know it happened a while back, but it finally aired on TV. Tomasso Ciampa, new NXT champion. Tomasso Ciampa. That seems, watching people that you knew in the indies, make that journey and finally rise up to the top of where they are right now. I know Tomasso Ciampa is not a Universal Champion, but NXT Champion is a big deal. Seeing them rise up, it's so rewarding, man. It's so great. I remember in 2014 when we went to WrestleMania 30 weekend, we went to saw Supercard of Honor 8, and Tomasso Ciampa was there defending the TV champion, the ROH TV title against Jay Lethal, and Jay Lethal won. That kicked off his huge TV title run. But man, Ciampa was so good in the ring, and just seen him before and since. I was always a huge fan of the Sicilian Psychopath, and I was sad when he left Ring of Honor because I don't think that it was immediately known that he was going to NXT. I think he bounced around for a while. I don't think he was around. I don't think he went straight from ROH to NXT. I could be wrong, but I don't think. But then seeing him debut in NXT. The whole DIY tag team with Gargano was so good that when they captured the tag team titles from the Revival, one of the greatest moments in NXT history, I think. And then, of course, their match, the first Cruiserweight Classic. Was it called the Cruiserweight Classic? Yeah, I guess so. The first Cruiserweight tournament. That match stole the entire tournament, man. It was what the whole thing was about. And then when they broke up, Ciampa got hurt immediately or right before it happened. So he was off TV for a long time, and that kind of killed his heat a little bit. Well, it could have killed his heat, but it didn't. I mean, the man kept his social media game strong. So strong that you couldn't forget about Tomasso Ciampa. He was so good at stirring things up and being on Twitter that just everything he posted made news, and it still does. Tomasso Ciampa's Twitter is basically a news feed. Anything he puts out is going to be in your wrestling news. So then he comes back. The matches that he's had with Gargano since have been so hot, so much heat since I think it was WrestleMania this year or Chicago, whichever. And then to see he gets this title shot against Aleister Black, and it was just on NXT TV, I thought, oh well, they're not gonna hotshot the title on TV, but they did. Ciampa, new champion, and I know Gargano had something to do with it. I haven't actually watched it yet. I like to watch NXT and 205 Live on Saturday mornings and pretend it's the 1990s, and I'm watching, or the 80s, and I'm watching my Saturday morning wrestling shows. But I do know Gargano had something to do with it. But Tomasso Ciampa, new NXT champion, and I was talking to a good brother Chuck, is Ciampa just a transitional guy to get the title off of a face Aleister Black and get onto a face Gargano? And Charlie said no, he didn't think so. He thought that they would milk Ciampa as champion until maybe WrestleMania. And I would love to see that, because I think Ciampa is the best heel in WWE right now, and it would be almost crazy to pull the title off of him with no direction. Now maybe they will pull the title off of him and keep him in the main event scene. I would love to see that, but I also don't want to see Gargano Ciampa too much. I don't want him to Kevin Owens, Sami Zayn it like the main roster did. Oh, so bravo to Tomasso Ciampa. But speaking of Kevin Owens, so he is headed into SummerSlam to take on Braun Strowman. I love Kevin Owens' work in the vignettes and stuff backstage right now. You know, he's such a good bad guy hiding behind things. You know, and he the way that he went over Kurt Angle's head on Raw this week to get a match with Braun Strowman for the Money in the Bank briefcase, I thought that was so schmarmy and so great. So now we're getting Strowman Owens for the briefcase at SummerSlam, and that should be a good match. I'd love to see. Here's my fantasy booking before we close out the week. I got to do a little fantasy booking. I'd love to see Kevin Owens and Braun Strowman. And now Kevin Owens mentioned when he asked for the match, if Strowman is disqualified, counted out, submits, pinned, he wins the Money in the Bank briefcase. So he's already set it up that no matter the finish, no matter what for the finish, if Strowman loses, Owens gets the briefcase. So I would like to see this match end in some sort of no contest that made Owens and Strowman the co-owners of the Money in the Bank briefcase. I can just imagine all sorts of fun being had with that. You know, Owens and Strowman having to decide together when they're going to cash it in, and when they do cash it in, makes it a triple threat. So it would seem futile for Owens as Strowman's Money in the Bank partner. But, you know, I think back to the days when, was it Jericho and China co-held the Intercontinental Championship? You know, there was fun things going on. I can just imagine that being fun. It would definitely shake things up with the Money in the Bank contract. I don't think Strowman having the Money in the Bank contract is that interesting, because he could have already had the championship. Anytime he's been positioned as a man who could cash it in and at any moment, you know, just smash whoever's the champion and win the title. Now, the only thing keeping him from doing that right now, I guess, is the fact that Brock Lesnar's never around and he's holding the Universal Championship on some farm in Canada. He's holding it hostage. So that's just a little bit of fantasy booking. Hey, if you have some other fantasy booking, thoughts on Hulk Hogan, thoughts on SummerSlam, thoughts on Evolution, thoughts on wrestling in general, I'd love to hear them. It's at Good Brothers WP. That's Wrestling Podcast, if you wonder what the WP is for. At Good Brothers WP on Twitter. Good Brothers Wrestling on Facebook. Send us a message. We love to hear from you guys. We love to hear from the people that listen. So send us a message on there. Follow us on Twitter. Like us on Facebook. GoodBrothersWrestling.com. I've been swamped. Honestly, that's a shoot lately. Finally getting my head above water. I'm really ready to bring some new content. I've had a lot of really good ideas for GoodBrothersWrestling.com. So keep your eye on there because I got something coming. I'm sure I've got something coming. Also, Good Brother Chuck just put up a new Funko Pop review. I think that was this week. It was this week or last week. He featuring the brand new series with Triple H and Asuka and Mr. McMahon. So check that out too. GoodBrothersWrestling.com, GoodBrothersWrestling.com, GoodBrothersWrestling.com. Make sure to subscribe on iTunes, Twitter, Stitcher, Google Play, and now Spotify to get this show as soon as it comes out every week. It's just the best way to get it. And that, with all those plugs, I'm done. For Good Brother Bobby, who I hope has a safe trip back here. This is me. This is the Good Brothers Wrestling Podcast, and we're out for the week. Summertime. Summertime. Time to kick back and unwind. Time to kick back and unwind.